So on the bubble, let's go back. This changed since yesterday. Yesterday we did bracketology update, right? And what did we have? In Joe Lunardi's bubble, right? He's the bracketologist for ESPN. You had Pitt as one of the last 4 in. Okay? You had North Carolina, one of the next 4 out. You had Wake, one of the next 4 out. We know the teams that are in the mix, right? The teams that were in: Clemson, Louisville.
SMU in the next 4 out as well.
SMU in the next 4 out as well. And the teams that weren't even on the bubble: Clemson, Louisville, Duke, right? Those were the squads that were quote-unquote in. Last night? Sorry. Let's go back to Monday. Monday, Pitt lost by 16 at home to Virginia.
Bruh.
Georgia Tech, who's under 500, in triple overtime last night, beat Clemson.
Bruh.
Georgia Tech, who's under 500, earlier in their season, actually their most recent game before Clemson, beat Louisville. So the teams that were not on the bubble, if you lose to schools that are under 500, guess where you're likely going to end up? On the bubble. And so now I'm looking at the bubble teams and I'm going, Wake is traveling to California, traveling to California to play Stanford. Stanford is a different beast in California than when they travel east. They are much better when teams have to travel from the east out there. SMU's on the bubble. They're playing at Virginia Tech tonight. Louisville is now likely closer to the bubble after losing to Georgia Tech. They are at Boston College tonight. The ACC is in danger of eating themselves alive. Eating themselves alive because of everything I said talking about the women's basketball in the ACC a second ago. It used to be you could lose those games and it would go, wow, that's such a great win for that team. And honestly, not a bad loss for that team because they're both very good teams. Now it's you lose in the ACC and it's not to Duke. Oh no, it's a panic move. And when that happens, if it happens too many times, right? If Clemson loses a couple more times, they're no longer even a medium-sized trophy fish. If Louisville loses a couple more times, everybody's going, that beginning was a fluke. Now beating them doesn't matter. And suddenly, there's no way for you to be upwardly mobile. Joe Lunardi, again, ESPN bracketologist. This going back to Monday. So before a bunch of these upset losses in the ACC, talked about the pathway for bubble teams from this particular conference and how difficult it's going to be.
All those bubble teams in the ACC, Pitt, Wake, Carolina, SMU, they've played 27 quad one games, and they've won 3 of them.
Oh.
So it's, in some ways, a miracle that Pitt is still in the field. It's more a comment on some of the teams chasing them. So outside of a Duke or playing Clemson away, let's say, just not real opportunities. And, beating each other up in the meantime cannot take the kind of loss that Pitt did tonight. Carolina, of course, has lost 4 out of 5 and had a chance at Cameron Indoor to make a statement, had a chance at Pitt before that. Absolutely a steel cage match coming up, Pitt and Carolina in the rematch this Saturday in Chapel Hill.
I mean, normally, and I was this way last year, and I was this way the year before, and I was this way the year before, when people want to disrespect the ACC, I get combative. I start throwing down. No, what you don't realize is they're actually, and this year I'm going to be pleading, right? Joe Lunardi basically, 3 out of 27 quad one games they've won, 3 out of 27. Just the fact that they're on the bubble, I feel like we should send them like a gift basket. Like, hey, appreciate you for not absolutely crushing us for those horrendous games against good teams.
Hey, you didn't completely stink.
Thanks for keeping us on the bubble. We won't forget it, Joe. And do you know what's right? There's 2 ways to look at this. 1, what's the cause? 2, what's the solution? Right? And you kind of have to figure out the cause before you figure out the solution. I think we figured out the cause. The cause is all of the coaching turnover. Right? The cause is, well, what was it? Rick Pitino, when he was the coach of the Celtics, said, Larry Bird's not walking through that tunnel. Like the cause is Roy Williams, Coach K, Jim Boeheim, Tony Bennett, Jim Larinaga at his prime, Leonard Hamilton once he retires after this year, announced it a couple days. They're not walking through that tunnel. So I'm not going to say like every year over the last 50 has been unbelievable for ACC basketball. There's been ups and downs. There's been years where they have, 3 top 5 teams. There's been years where they probably have no deserving top 10 teams. Like there's ups and downs, but there was always a unanimous understanding that the leaders will get it right. Right? If Carolina started slow, Dean will figure it out. I'll give Roy another couple weeks. He'll have this team cruising. You didn't panic because you trusted the drivers. There's very little of that right now. And not because they're not smart guys, not because they're not smart coaches that have been around the game. It's just an experience thing. With Leonard Hamilton retiring at the end of this year, he was the longest tenured ACC coach. Jon Scheyer is now easily in the top half most tenured ACC coaches. Jon Scheyer is the 8th longest tenured ACC coach. He took over in 2022. Like, he's still getting, when we talk about Duke this year, he's still getting the he's a young coach. He's still learning. I'm glad to see him figure out this thing that plagued him in his first 2 years. He's now one of the elder statesmen in the ACC, along with Hubert Davis, who's tied for the 6th longest tenure. He showed up 1 year before Scheyer in 2021. And Kevin Keatts at NC State is the 2nd longest tenured coach in the ACC. He had been there since 2017. Do you remember the first time? Actually, not the first time. It happens every couple months. You have to go into the gas station. You're getting a drink. You're getting some snacks. You got to pay for gas, whatever. And you see that little tear-off sign that says, if you're not, if you weren't born on this date, you can't buy tobacco products. The first time that date was 2000, and you're like, whoa, what happened here? The 8th longest tenured head coach in an 18-team league, so a top half, most experienced coach coaching in the league, got the job in 2022. It just turned 2025. I just stopped writing 2024 on the top of my papers. It just happened. And it goes back to what we said yesterday, right? Because that's the cause. The cause is you just don't have the experienced, grizzled veteran coaches that will look at, this roster isn't playing the way I thought, and have the move, right? Have the fix. You don't have that. So that's the cause. The solution goes back to what we said yesterday about UNC. When Hubert Davis, into his 4th season, is finally going hey, you know what? We're going to hire someone to run recruiting, someone to run fundraising, and a GM, and we have to build out this staff. These guys need help. These guys need help for at least a little while. I look at it, and I put so much of this, I always kind of relate it back to other sports or whatever. Imagine this is quarterbacks, okay? And we had Brady, and we had Manning, and we had Breeze, and we had Rivers, and we had the other Manning, and we had these quarterbacks for 2 decades. And then the young guys took over because those guys retired. Guess what the young guys needed? Good offensive lines, great play callers, right? Good wide receivers. They needed that. Brady, he was putting together great offenses in New England with the joke always was grocery store baggers at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Right? Rodgers, do you know how many first-round picks Rodgers got at wide receiver in his career in Green Bay? None. Up until very recently, the Jets, I believe the only first-round pick he ever completed a pass to was Mercedes Lewis, and that was at the very end of his career, a tight end that had played for a billion other teams. Those guys could get it done without that help. You didn't turn around and go to their replacements and say, yeah, Brady could do it without any solid number 1 wide receivers, so we're just going to have you do it too. No, you gave them more help, and then as they get better, guess what they start doing? Asking for more money, and that's when you start taking away their help. Same thing should happen with these coaches, right? If you're taking over one of if you're taking over Virginia this offseason, if you're taking over Miami this offseason, if you're taking over Florida State this offseason because they're all open, or if they don't go with the interim coaches because those coaches just left, I would be asking as much as I would money. I would be asking for support. I'd be asking for help. I'd be asking for recruiting help. I'd be asking for program like front office help. I'd be asking for help because it's hard enough just doing the coaching thing. It's hard enough just being able to look at your roster and go, oh, these skill sets aren't matching up the way I envisioned them when I recruited. I need to put 110%, I know that's impossible, but you get what I'm saying, of my attention into finding the way this puzzle piece works. You may not have had to do that for Roy Williams and Coach K. Those guys had other wealths of knowledge to reach into. Mm-hmm. And you hope your next coach, whoever ends up being the guy, gets there, but they're not going to start there. Right? Kind of like a Patrick Mahomes started with, well, he needs Tyreek Hill, and he needs this, and he needs Kelsey, and now he's getting to the point where it's like, take Tyreek away, he'll make it work with Rashee Rice. Eventually, he's going to take away Kelsey, and he'll get it done with Noah Gray, and he'll become the old head, but he didn't start that way.